Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail for the heady, smoky fog of Tudor England, the only time in history when lighting something on fire and sucking on it was considered both fashionable and an act of international diplomacy. Welcome to the world of Tudor tobacco addiction, where people inhaled burning leaves for fun, profit, and possibly to avoid smelling anything else in 16th century London. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. And now, dim those lights, switch on your fan for some gentle white noise, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in so the ghost of Henry VIII doesn't try to sell you a pipe. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to live in the only era where smoking meant status, sex appeal, and accidentally setting your hat on fire? Did everyone in Tudor England actually walk around with a pipe? How expensive was tobacco? And could you really lose your inheritance over a misplaced cigarillo? Was there a great nicotine panic of 1587? Did Elizabethan doctors recommend tobacco for everything from gout to existential dread? And, perhaps most important, could you survive a day in a world where your breath smells like a bonfire and your neighbor's medicinal habit is just thinly disguised chain smoking? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1588. England is about to defeat the Spanish Armada. Queen Elizabeth's roughs are reaching critical mass. And you, lucky you, are about to experience the first true tobacco rush. Your lungs will never be the same. Good luck. You open your eyes to the damp, grey light of Tudor London, a city that smells like wet wool and regret. But today, there's something new in the air. A sharp, unfamiliar scent drifting from the docks, tobacco, freshly arrived from the New World. You have questions. Is it a miracle cure? A tool of the devil? Or just another way to set money on fire? No one knows. But everyone is pretending they do. Let's set the scene. The year is 1588. Sir Walter Raleigh has just swaggered back from the Americas with a crate full of suspicious leaves and a twinkle in his eye that says, "Trust me, you want this." Word spreads across London faster than gossip about the Queen's latest wig. The city is electric with curiosity, confusion, and, frankly, a little bit of panic. Is it food? Is it medicine? Should you try to smoke it, eat it, or rub it on that weird rash you picked up last time you used a public bath? You wander down to the Thames, where the docks are alive with their usual orchestra of creaking wood, squawking gulls, and men in codpieces arguing about whose ship is bigger. Among the barrels of salted fish and crates of questionable oranges, you spot a small crowd. They're gathered around a sailor demonstrating the art of smoking, a performance equal parts magic trick and health hazard. He stuffs some of the brown leaf into a pipe, lights it, and begins to produce thick clouds of smoke from both nostrils. The crowd gasps. One woman faints. You suspect she just wanted an excuse to get out of her chores for the day. Within weeks, everyone who is anyone is talking about tobacco. Physicians claim it's a miracle sent by God to cure every ailment known to man. Headache? Smoke it. Gout? Smoke more. General ennui? Double the dose and try not to think about it. Apothecaries start hawking it from market stalls, right next to bottles of snake oil and jars of unicorn grease. Nobody can agree what tobacco actually does. But that's never stopped the English from buying things before. The first official shipment of tobacco lands with all the subtlety of a cannonball. Courtiers rush to outdo each other with the latest imported blend. You overhear a man in a velvet doublet explaining that tobacco opens the lungs and brightens the wit. His wife, unimpressed, points out that his wit could use a bit more brightening and maybe he should try eating a vegetable once in a while. Still, the trend spreads like, well, wildfire. Suddenly every poet, playwright and professional layabout in London, is desperate for a pipe. The price of tobacco climbs faster than the rent on a Thames-side hovel. It becomes a status symbol, right up there with a feathered cap, a ruff so large it doubles as a dinner tray, and the ability to say indubitably without snorting. You catch sight of the local alderman paying an entire week's wages for a handful of dried leaves, then attempting to smoke them out of a mug. You try not to laugh, but he's your landlord and he's already doubled your rent once this month. And then, of course, come the warnings. The church issues stern sermons about the dangers of satanic fumes. Your neighbor claims it will turn your insides black, and your soul even blacker. You nod along, but later spot him sneaking a pipe behind his chicken coop, looking both guilty and deeply satisfied. Londoners, it turns out, are better at judging than abstaining. But for every critic, there are 10 converts. Merchants start adding tobacco to every sign, whether or not they actually sell any. Children chase each other through the streets with bundles of dried leaves, inventing games that mostly end in coughing fits and stern lectures. The city smells different now, less like boiled cabbage, more like someone left a campfire smouldering in the privy. By the end of the month, you can't walk 10 feet without bumping into a would-be philosopher, pipe in hand, waxing poetic about the mysteries of the new world. You take a deep breath, cough, and realize, this is only the beginning. London is hooked, and there's no going back. Not until someone invents the nicotine patch, at least. Welcome to the age of tobacco. Congratulations, your lungs will never be the same. It's time. A nobleman offers you a clay pipe and a conspiratorial wink. You accept, because peer pressure has existed for centuries. You try to light it with flint and steel, mostly burning your thumb. The first drag tastes like someone set your breakfast on fire. You cough. Everyone pretends not to notice. Congratulations, you're officially one of England's earliest nicotine casualties. Let's talk about initiation. In Tudor England, nobody is born knowing how to smoke. It's not instinct, like sneezing or running from angry geese. It's a ritual, a test of courage, a rite of passage that sits somewhere between joining a secret society and losing your dignity in public. You're not just trying tobacco, you're auditioning for a spot in the rapidly growing club of the fashionably wheezy. Your teacher is a seasoned professional, which in this case means he's been smoking for a whole 2 months and only passes out every other Wednesday. He demonstrates a careful scoop of the mysterious brown leaf, a gentle tamp with a stick that he insists is imported from Spain. It's not. And then a lecture about the virtues of slow, dignified puffing. You try to listen, but the process is already feeling suspiciously like alchemy performed by someone who's never actually seen gold. Your own pipe is a hand-me-down, clay, awkward, and so short that it threatens to set your nose hairs alight. The nobleman leans in, whispering, "Don't inhale too fast, or you'll see angels." You are fairly certain the only angels you'll see are the ones collecting your soul when you choke to death. Still, you strike the flint, miss, strike again, and finally produce a spark that ignites the tobacco, and at least 3 of your personal regrets. The smoke is immediate, aggressive, and unashamedly hot. You try to look composed, but your eyes water and your throat feels like you've swallowed a handful of gravel mixed with disappointment. The flavor? Think burnt toast, if the toast was actually a soggy log fished from the Thames. You cough, a deep, chesty explosion that echoes off the tavern walls. A few people glance over, but etiquette demands they act like nothing happened. This is England, after all. Peer pressure takes many forms. Here, it's the expectation that you'll finish what you started. The nobleman smiles, revealing teeth the color of tea-stained parchment, and nods for you to try again. You oblige. managing a smaller, less catastrophic puff. It's still awful, but you manage not to choke this time. Progress. Someone passes you a tankard of ale to help the medicine go down. You take a grateful swig, ignoring the fact that the ale is roughly room temperature and has a dead fly floating in it. Small mercies. Another friend tells you, in a low voice, that tobacco wards off bad humors. You silently wonder what happens if the only humor it brings is the kind where people laugh at you behind your back. Across the room, a more experienced smoker exhales a perfect smoke ring, which lingers in the air like a smug little halo. You attempt the same, producing a cloud that looks less like a ring and more like a distress signal. Still, the ritual continues. Each new puff brings a slightly less violent reaction. Your eyes stop watering. Your hands stop trembling. You begin to feel a warmth, or possibly just mild hypoxia. Either way, you're settling in. There's a certain camaraderie in shared suffering. Everyone remembers their first disastrous puff. Stories are exchanged. Who fainted, who set their beard on fire, who accidentally inhaled an ember and spent the next week speaking in falsetto. The failures become badges of honor. Surviving your first tobacco ritual is proof that you can take your place among the initiated. Along with a hacking cough and a growing suspicion that you've made a terrible life choice, the ritual ends with applause. Not actual applause, but a polite nod and the passing of a slightly greasy handkerchief to wipe your lips and dignity. You feel lightheaded, vaguely triumphant, and ready to lie down. Instead, you grin, raise your pipe, and promise yourself this will get easier with time. It doesn't, but you'll keep trying anyway. Welcome to the club. Membership includes a persistent cough, a lifetime supply of charred thumbprints, and the unspoken agreement that no one will ever talk about what just happened. You're officially a Tudor tobacco initiate. Let's talk gear. The Tudor smoker's kit is part status symbol, part fire hazard. Pipes of every size, tinderboxes that double as conversation starters, and hats designed to survive stray embers. You practice your best thoughtful smoker pose in the mirror, but mostly just end up with ash on your doublet. To smoke like a true Tudor is to step into a world where equipment is as important as etiquette. Tobacco might be new, but the competition to look good while using it is ancient. The pipe itself is your calling card. Some favor short, sturdy clay pipes, perfect for burning your moustache and reminding your enemies you're not afraid of danger. Others, the true connoisseurs and those with long arms, choose delicate, foot-long stems that keep the smoke and the accidental burns at a safe distance. The longer the pipe, the more sophisticated the owner, or so they claim. You try to look elegant holding one, but it mostly feels like waving a tiny, angry flute. Then there's the matter of the tinderbox. No self-respecting smoker leaves home without one, and ideally it's decorated in a way that lets you subtly brag about your social standing. The wealthy opt for silver or brass boxes, sometimes engraved with family crests or inspirational Latin phrases, ignis est vita, fire is life, sounding much more impressive than I keep setting myself on fire. Inside, you'll find flint, steel, scraps of charcloth, and occasionally whatever last week's dinner left behind. Lighting your pipe is a ritual all its own, requiring coordination, patience, and a strong tolerance for failure. You fumble through the process with all the grace of a chicken trying to read. First, pack the bowl. Too tight, and you'll have to suck harder than a courtier currying favor. Too loose, and it'll burn out before you can finish looking mysterious. Once packed, you strike the flint, send sparks flying, and hope no one is watching closely enough to notice that you just set your own sleeve alight. If you're lucky, the pipe catches on the second or third try, and you can pretend you did it on purpose. But technique matters too. There are as many schools of Tudor pipe smoking as there are ways to fail at it. Some advocate slow, steady puffs, claiming this delivers the truest flavor. Others, usually the ones who enjoy fainting, go for deep, heroic inhales, eyes watering, lips pursed, making it look like they're either contemplating the mysteries of existence or desperately trying not to vomit. You experiment, settling on a careful balance between contemplative sage and man choking on a small, angry cloud. Fashion can't be neglected. The best smokers are also the best dressed, or at least the least flammable. Doublets with high collars are in style. But watch out. One stray ember and you're walking around with a polka dot pattern no tailor can fix. Hats are crucial. Wide brims protect you from the sun, the rain, and the occasional raining ember from the pipe of the man standing above you in the tavern gallery. Some ambitious souls sport feathers in their caps, only to discover that singed peacock is an acquired scent. You learn quickly to avoid velvet. It never recovers from scorch marks, and the city's dry cleaners are just two blokes and a bucket. Of course, to truly master the art, you need the look. There's an entire range of approved smoker expressions: thoughtful, brooding, bored, or deeply philosophical. In theory, you're meant to appear wise and aloof. In practice, most smokers just look mildly confused, one eyebrow raised, as if pondering the price of herring rather than the secrets of the universe. Occasionally, you catch your reflection and see only ash, wrinkles, and the resigned face of someone who's just realized their favorite rough now smells like a chimney. Above all, you must smoke in public. Smoking alone is considered odd, possibly even dangerous. Gather with friends, rivals, or complete strangers in the tavern or at court. Compare techniques, swap tips, and try to hide your relief when someone else sets themselves on fire first. Only then have you truly learned to smoke like a Tudor. Awkwardly, extravagantly, and always with a slight whiff of singed dignity. Congratulations! You may not look mysterious, but you do look historic. And that's half the battle. Tobacco is the Bitcoin of 1587. It's expensive, hard to find, and possibly being sold to you by a man named Roger who swears it's pure Virginia. You do the math. 1 ounce costs more than your neighbor's entire lunch budget. You resolve to cut back. You absolutely do not cut back. Let's talk numbers. The first shipments of tobacco arrive in tiny barrels, each leaf handled with the reverence usually reserved for holy relics or extra gravy. Supply is limited, and every merchant in London claims their stash is the real thing, smuggled past the Spanish, untouched by rats, and definitely not just dried weeds from the back of the garden. There are rumors of counterfeiters, men who mix in hay, dock leaves, and last season's parsley, rolling it all up and passing it off as West Indies gold. You learn to be suspicious. If your tobacco smells like soup, Roger's lying again. Prices rise faster than the Thames at flood season. In some taverns, a single pinch of tobacco costs more than a round of drinks. And there's always someone lingering nearby, ready to swap just a taste for a night's worth of gossip. You discover that borrowing tobacco is now a socially accepted crime. Your friends develop elaborate excuses for why their pouches are empty. Lost to thieves, borrowed by cousins, eaten by dogs, or, most commonly, I'm waiting for my next shipment. You nod sympathetically, even as you notice the familiar bulge of a full pouch in their doublet. Tobacco is now currency. Debts are settled in leaves, not coins. A good blend can buy you a favor, a second chance, or a promise to keep quiet about that embarrassing thing that happened at last month's masquerade. 1 ounce of Virginian gold could pay for a week of room and board in the better parts of town. You quickly realize the true source of power in London isn't the Queen. It's the man with a secret stash and a reputation for generosity. Everyone wants an invitation to Roger's parlor, but not everyone gets one. The economics get weirder as the Crown takes notice. Tax collectors start sniffing around, less interested in your personal finances and more concerned about whether you've paid the new royal leaf duty. The penalty for evasion is public shaming, or worse, having your stash confiscated and smoked by the taxman in front of you. Desperate smokers go underground, meeting in candle-lit cellars and behind the apothecary's shop to trade, barter, and quietly mock the government's taste in tobacco. You attend one of these gatherings and immediately lose half your weekly wage on a blend that tastes like burnt celery. Imports remain unpredictable. One month, every dockworker in London is carrying crates marked herbs. The next, a Spanish blockade means the city runs dry, sending prices sky high and tempers even higher. You see fistfights over the last pinch of tobacco at the market, and rumors spread of counterfeit blends made from whatever's left in the garden shed. You consider trying dried apple leaves, but remember last time and the 2 days you spent coughing up your regrets. If you think growing your own will save you, think again. The climate is uncooperative, the seeds expensive, and your neighbors suspicious of anyone digging too enthusiastically after dark. Plus, everyone knows a man in Kent who tried to plant his own crop, only to wake up and find that someone had liberated it for the good of the parish. You consider starting a support group for the chronically addicted, but everyone you invite just wants to know if you brought any samples. By now, your own tobacco budget rivals the Crown's war chest. You keep meaning to quit, or at least cut back, but every time you try, someone walks by with a fresh pouch, and you find yourself bartering away your last good pair of stockings. Your family starts hiding valuables. Your landlord offers to accept tobacco in lieu of rent, but only if it's the good stuff. You promise next week will be different. It won't. The market is ruthless, your willpower is weak, and Roger is already at the door with a brand new pouch and that same suspicious grin. Congratulations. You're an addict, and business is booming. Suddenly, everyone important is smoking. Nobles, poets, courtiers, even the royal falconer. Not smoking is starting to look suspicious. You light up at every opportunity, hoping to be mistaken for someone with influence. All you get is a hacking cough and a reputation for smelling exotic. This is how social mobility works in Tudor England. You don't buy a new coat or commission a portrait. You acquire a pipe and pretend you know what you're doing with it. The entire court is abuzz, quite literally, if you count the sound of collective wheezing. The rich and powerful stride through the palace gardens, trailing clouds of fragrant smoke, trading witticisms and mildly threatening each other with their flaming sticks. If you want to move up in the world, you'd better be ready to join them, or at least look like you might have a secret stash. You find yourself practicing your thoughtful smoker lean against every available surface. There's an art to it. Not too casual, that's for stable boys. Not too stiff, that's for accountants and people with guilty consciences. You aim for I could be summoned to the Queen at any moment, but right now I'm busy contemplating the meaning of imported leaves. This mostly results in you burning a hole in your sleeve and tripping over a chamber pot. It's all about appearances. You overhear 2 minor nobles at the market, debating whether Spanish or Virginia tobacco gives off a richer bouquet. One of them is holding a pipe so large it could double as a weapon. The other has accessorized his with a silver chain and an air of vague disappointment. No one mentions that they're both wheezing like bellows after a hard winter. In this world, a cough isn't a health problem, it's a status symbol. The pressure to participate is relentless. Invitations to smoking rooms at the houses of the powerful become the new test of popularity. Get invited, and you're in. Get left out, and you're probably one bad rumor away from banishment to the country. There are rules, of course. Never light up before your host. Never criticize someone's blend, even if it smells like old boots. And always pretend you understand the latest rumor about Sir Walter Raleigh's technique. You nod a lot. You take mental notes. You wonder if anyone has actually met Sir Walter Raleigh. At court, the competition is fierce. Every social climber with half a shilling is vying to be noticed. Pipes grow longer, hats grow wider, and tales of tobacco-fueled adventures become ever more improbable. One man swears he smoked 3 bowls and wrote a sonnet in an hour. Another claims his pipe cured his toothache, his insomnia, and his wife's personality. No one dares challenge these stories for fear of being labeled unworldly or, worse, a tea drinker. For women, the rules are different and twice as complicated. Officially, tobacco is for men, but everyone knows the best gossip is exchanged behind a screen in the ladies' gallery, pipe smoke wafting out like a coded message. You catch your aunt with a clay pipe and a conspiratorial smile, warning you not to mention it to your uncle, who's still pretending to believe it's a new kind of incense. All the while, the city's air grows thicker. Every public event is blanketed with smoke, fairs, markets, even church services if the vicar is feeling trendy. The phrase, smoke and mirrors, has never been more accurate. You learn to fake a mysterious expression, squinting meaningfully through the haze and hoping no one asks you any actual questions about politics or poetry. The truth is, smoking rarely wins you true friends or influence. More often, you find yourself at the center of awkward conversations, stuck between a minor baron with a collection of imported blends and a poet who quotes Ovid between coughing fits. But the performance must go on. You cough, you puff, you listen, and every now and then you manage to slip into the background, unnoticed except for the lingering trail of burnt leaves. You may never reach the top of the social ladder, but at least you can say you climbed it, one puff at a time. Reeking of ambition, optimism, and a blend that's probably more cabbage than tobacco. In Tudor England, that counts for something. The local apothecary insists tobacco cures everything. Colds, headaches, heartbreak, and possibly the plague. He prescribes you a daily pipe for vigorous humors. You feel exactly the same, except now your bedsheets smell like a campfire, and you've developed a mysterious wheeze. Let's face it, Tudor medicine is mostly creative guesswork with a dash of wishful thinking. You're living in an age where leeches are considered cutting edge, and nobody has quite figured out that washing your hands before surgery isn't just for the fussy. Enter tobacco, the latest miracle from the New World, touted by every quack, barber, and self-appointed physician with access to a pipe and a flair for marketing. Your doctor, whose qualifications include surviving last year's outbreak and owning a hat with an intimidatingly wide brim, greets you with a grin and a pouch of specially blended tobacco. He declares it God's own remedy for the humors and insists that anyone not partaking is probably inviting disaster. You're not sure which disaster he means, but after one look at his client list, you decide to play along. The apothecary shelves are suddenly filled with tobacco concoctions, snuff for sniffing, ointments for rubbing, and poultices for, well, you'd rather not know. One local recipe calls for soaking the leaves in vinegar, then wrapping them around your temples for headaches. Another recommends smoke enemas for anyone feeling lethargic, which is exactly as appealing as it sounds. You make a mental note never to be that desperate. Of course, no two experts agree on dosage. Some recommend 1 pipe a day for maintenance. Others insist on 3, especially if you're feeling under the weather or trying to impress your neighbor's wife. A few particularly ambitious healers swear by chewing the raw leaf, which quickly becomes a test of character, dental strength, and willingness to endure public ridicule. You try it once, immediately regret your choices, and spend the next hour rinsing your mouth out with whatever wine you can find. Rumours swirl about the miraculous recoveries credited to tobacco. Lady Marjorie's gout? Vanished, or at least replaced by a persistent cough. Master Holt's melancholy? Lifted, if only because he's too busy smoking to complain. There's even talk of tobacco as a shield against the plague itself. After all, how can a disease survive in a body that smells like a chimney? Its logic, Tudor style, bold, questionable, and just convincing enough for a desperate population. Inevitably, there are the doubters. The town priest preaches against devilish vapors, blaming every lost sheep and broken window on the growing fog of tobacco. The midwife shakes her head and mutters about unnatural airs. Still, demand rises. You overhear a group of labourers at the tavern swapping stories of miraculous healing. One claims his toothache vanished after a week of smoking. Another says he hasn't had a cold since switching from the local blend to pure Spanish. The bartender quietly wonders if he should start selling pipes instead of ale. With so many miracle claims, it's hard to ignore the growing list of side effects. For every ache cured, there's a new complaint. Coughs, sore throats, headaches of an entirely different kind. Your own experience? Your nose is permanently stuffy. Your voice has acquired a gravelly timbre. And your cat refuses to sleep in the same bed as you. You mention this to your doctor, who simply nods and prescribes more tobacco, perhaps a new blend. Or maybe try sniffing it this time, for variety. It doesn't stop there. Soon, every corner of daily life involves tobacco as a solution. Feeling tired? Light up. Too energetic? Smoke more. Relationship troubles? A shared pipe, the universal Tudor icebreaker. You wonder how anyone managed before the age of tobacco, probably with fresh air and fewer regrets. And yet, in spite of the dubious science, the wheezing, and the ever-present smell of burnt leaves, you keep lighting up, because if nothing else, you now belong to a world where the cure for everything, from heartbreak to plague, is never further away than your next puff. And at the end of the day, that's good enough for Tudor medicine. Probably. There are always skeptics. The town priest calls tobacco Satan's incense. Your grandmother claims it will turn your tongue black and shrivel your wit. You ignore her, mostly because she still thinks tomatoes are poisonous. Still, a pamphlet circulates warning that smoking could cause melancholy, madness, and spontaneous nosebleeds. Tempting. Let's set the mood. You're walking down a crowded London lane, pipe in hand, when you hear a familiar sound, the distant shriek of outrage. Another anti-tobacco sermon is in full swing. The preacher has taken up position on a wobbly crate outside the bakery and is describing, in vivid detail, how every puff invites the devil into your lungs. He waves a pamphlet so aggressively that it nearly takes flight, declaring that England is turning into a nation of reeking sinners. You try not to make eye contact, but it's hard when he's glaring at your pipe as if it's about to sprout horns. Anti-tobacco crusaders are everywhere. Their favorite tactic: shame. Your neighbor's wife clucks her tongue and mutters about the fate of your immortal soul every time you pass. Her cat looks equally judgmental. The barber, who, just yesterday, was experimenting with herbal blends, now offers unsolicited advice on the dangers of smoking. He says it sours the blood, weakens the knees, and gives a man the face of a prune. For a moment, you consider quitting. Then you remember your barber is also the town dentist. And last week he tried to cure a toothache with a hammer. Then come the pamphlets, each more dramatic than the last. One features a woodcut of a man whose head has exploded after a particularly enthusiastic puff. Another describes a woman who smoked herself into a trance, only to wake with a beard. The warnings are delivered with absolute certainty and absolutely no evidence. You collect a few, mostly because they make good conversation starters at parties. Did you hear, you ask, that tobacco can cause your nose to fall off? Someone gasps. Someone else lights another pipe. Even royalty gets involved. King James I first famously pens an entire treatise against tobacco, calling it a custom loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, and dangerous to the lungs. He decrees that tobacco should be heavily taxed, banned in the palace, and never, under any circumstances, given to the royal spaniels. You read his pamphlet, cough into your sleeve, and keep smoking anyway. After all, if the king hates it, it must be doing something right. But the warnings start to get under your skin, literally. Every new blemish, every sore throat, every bad mood is now evidence that tobacco is slowly consuming you from within. You try not to think about it, but your grandmother keeps appearing in doorways, whispering dark prophecies about shriveled livers and shrunken brains. You finally snap and ask her about her own youthful habits. She admits to eating unripe gooseberries for health, and you call it a draw. The church is relentless. Special prayers are offered for the deliverance of souls from the smoky grasp of vice. At least one neighbor confesses to the vicar, hoping to atone for years of second-hand smoke. The vicar, secretly partial to the occasional sniff of snuff, counsels forgiveness and hands out pamphlets. You wonder if this is all an elaborate way to corner the local market on approved herbal remedies. Street preachers rail, and still the city smokes. Your friends joke about the dangers. Don't light up, or you'll start quoting Spanish poetry. Careful, tobacco makes your knees weak and your pockets empty. The warnings become part of the ritual, a shared performance. Everyone knows someone who swears their great-uncle dropped dead mid-puff, and yet every evening the tavern fills with clouds thick enough to obscure even the grimmest preacher's scowl. In the end, you realize the anti-tobacco crusaders have a point. Smoking does come with risks. Coughing fits, singed eyebrows, the possibility of being scolded by your grandmother for the rest of eternity. But for every warning, there's a new convert, another soul drawn in by the allure of the forbidden leaf. Melancholy, madness, and nosebleeds, perhaps. But also camaraderie, rebellion, and the sweet, sweet smell of not caring, at least until the next sermon. You keep puffing. After all, if history teaches anything, it's that nothing makes a habit more appealing than someone else telling you to stop. Legal tobacco is expensive. Illicit tobacco is everywhere, smuggled in by sailors, hawked by street urchins, and sometimes found in your own sock drawer. You try a sample. It tastes like hay and heartbreak. You smoke it anyway. This is the underbelly of Tudor England, where the real action isn't in the palace but in the alleys behind the fish market. Official tobacco, if you can get it, comes in neat little packets stamped with a royal seal, sold at 3 times the price of a decent dinner. The rest? It's found goods, stale, suspicious, and as legal as feeding rats in church. Yet somehow, it's everywhere, and everyone claims to know a guy who knows a guy. You start noticing the signs. A wink from a market vendor, a whispered Virginia's finest as you pass a darkened doorway. Your best friend's younger brother has suddenly become the richest urchin in London and insists on calling himself Sir Richard the Supplier. There's even a rumor that the baker is selling tobacco buns. You're not sure what that means, but you order 2 just to be safe. The smugglers themselves are a strange and colourful bunch. Sailors with more scars than teeth, who claim to have braved hurricanes and Spanish blockades just to bring you the good stuff. Street urchins who move faster than the law, slipping between crowds and out of sight before the town constable can finish sneezing. Every shady alley has its entrepreneur, and every inn has a back room where fortunes are made, lost, and smoked away. Buying on the black market is a performance in itself. First, you need to look casual, which is difficult when you're glancing over your shoulder every 3 seconds and jumping at the sound of church bells. Then, you haggle. The price starts high, then gets higher as soon as you open your mouth. The seller claims this batch was fresh off the Spanish galleons, cured by moonlight, or blessed by a blind monk. You finally settle for a handful of leaves wrapped in yesterday's news, handed over with a wink and a warning not to smoke it all at once, or at least not near an open flame. Quality is, to put it mildly, unpredictable. Sometimes the tobacco is so dry it crumbles at the touch. Sometimes it's damp and smells faintly of low tide. You try not to think about where it's been or what it's been mixed with. Smugglers are known for adding a little something extra. Rose petals if you're lucky, dock leaves if you're not. Occasionally, someone tries to pass off shredded cabbage or sawdust. You notice when you smoke it, but by then you're committed. If anyone asks, it's an acquired taste. Law enforcement, for their part, is mostly in on the joke. The town constable claims to be cracking down on illegal sales, but you saw him last night in the alley, buying 2 pouches and a cinnamon bun from Sir Richard. The city posts new proclamations every week about the dangers of illicit tobacco, warning of heavy fines, public shame, and the risk of accidentally funding Spanish pirates. Everyone laughs, then goes back to haggling in the shadow of the church steeple. Storage is its own headache. You stash your precious pouch in the bottom of your trunk, inside a sock, under last year's collection of unpaid bills. Some people sew secret pockets into their doublets. Others hide it inside hollowed-out loaves of bread or inside the family Bible. Though that last one nearly caused a scandal when the vicar came over for tea. You learn to check every hiding place twice, especially after your cousin borrows your stash for a poetry reading. The social dynamics of smuggling are complicated. Sharing is expected after all. Nobody wants to risk a trip to the apothecary with a batch that could double as mulch. If you refuse to share, you'll be labelled a miser, or worse, an informant. On the other hand, sharing too much means running out before the next ship arrives. You master the art of rationing, cutting leaves with precision, and always having a story ready for why you're suddenly out. Still, the thrill of the illicit never quite wears off. There's a sense of adventure in every stolen pinch and smuggled pouch, a camaraderie among lawbreakers and risk-takers. In Tudor England, smoking is more than a habit. It's an act of quiet rebellion, a secret handshake between the desperate, the daring, and those who can't afford the king's price. And even if it tastes like hay and heartbreak, you wouldn't trade it for anything else, except maybe, just this once, a legal smoke. Word spreads that even Queen Elizabeth herself enjoys the occasional pipe. This changes everything. If the monarch can take a break from executing cousins to inhale burning leaves, so can you. You imagine her, regal, unbothered, and just slightly less terrifying after a few drags. In Tudor England, nothing shapes public opinion quite like royal approval. 1 minute, tobacco is just another suspicious import from the New World. The next, it's a fashionable accessory. All thanks to Her Majesty's supposed fondness for the occasional puff. Suddenly, every ambitious courtier, social climber, and neighborhood gossip is desperate for the royal experience, and preferably the royal brand. Let's picture it. The Queen, in her famously elaborate ruff, large enough to support a family of starlings, reclines in her private chambers, flanked by nervous ladies in waiting and the faint smell of lavender and gunpowder. A silver pipe, elegantly crafted and possibly worth more than your entire house, sits at her side. Her Majesty, always one for spectacle, raises it to her lips with all the poise of someone who could have you beheaded for sneezing at the wrong time. One measured puff, a slow exhale, and an entire room of courtiers collectively decides that yes, this is now the height of sophistication. The ripple effect is immediate. Tobacco becomes the must-have accessory at court. Poets write sonnets, comparing their beloved's beauty to a morning cloud drifting from the Queen's own pipe. Merchants advertise Elizabethan blend, which, suspiciously, tastes just like last week's Drake's Delight. Nobles compete to own the finest imported leaf, commissioning gold-trimmed pouches and hiring artists to paint flattering portraits of themselves, mid-smoke, looking absolutely nothing like a startled ferret. Court fashion adjusts accordingly. Pipe holders are sewn into velvet doublets, jewels and ribbons dangle from the stems of pipes, turning what was once a practical tool into a minor fire hazard and a major status symbol. The Queen's own pipe, if the rumours are true, is carved from ivory, inlaid with gems, and probably insured for more than the Tower of London. Of course, where the Queen leads, imitators follow, often disastrously. In taverns and parlours across the kingdom, you witness a parade of ambitious smokers, most of whom haven't mastered the basics. Someone inevitably burns a hole in the tapestry, and a duke is seen coughing so violently during dinner that he has to excuse himself to the garden. You try to copy Elizabeth's rumoured style, holding your pipe at a precise angle and practicing a regal, unflappable expression. It mostly just gives you a cramp. The ripple even reaches the clergy. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who once declared tobacco the work of the devil, now offers cautious praise for the Queen's refreshing pastime. Ministers who were previously burning pamphlets about sinful fumes quietly begin requesting pipes of their own. You watch as a famous preacher, caught mid-puff behind the vestry, claims he's merely testing Her Majesty's medicine for spiritual research. He's not fooling anyone, least of all himself, and yet the rumours persist. Does Elizabeth really smoke, or is this just clever court propaganda? Some say she adopted the habit to appear worldly and open-minded. Others whisper it's to ease the tension after a long day of keeping her nobles in check and her enemies on their toes. A few suggest she prefers snuff, taken discreetly during council meetings, less fire risk, more plausible deniability. Regardless of the truth, the legend is enough. You find yourself practicing your best queenly pose, pipe in hand, chin lifted, eyes narrowed in what you hope is an expression of supreme confidence and not just indigestion. Every street vendor claims to sell the royal blend. Children skip rope to new rhymes about Elizabeth's smoke, while the city's artists sketch imaginary portraits of Her Majesty, dreamy-eyed and wreathed in fragrant clouds. The reality is probably far less glamorous. You suspect the Queen, ever the pragmatist, might simply enjoy the excuse to sit quietly and avoid awkward small talk. Who can blame her? You take a long drag, try to look imperious, and for a moment feel a little less like a commoner and a little more like royalty, minus the jewels, the executioner, and the family drama. One thing's certain: if the Queen's doing it, so is everyone else. And in the smoky, ambitious swirl of Tudor England, that's all the royal endorsement you'll ever need. You notice something strange in the mirror. Your teeth, once merely questionable, are now officially haunted house. You try scrubbing them with sage, coal, and whatever else you find in the garden. The stains remain. You practice smiling with your mouth closed. It's fine. Let's not sugarcoat it. Tudor dentistry is 1 part improvisation, 1 part brute force, and 0 parts actual science. Dental hygiene means swirling some vinegar, gnawing on a stick, or, if you're feeling particularly inspired, praying to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of not losing your molars before 30. Add tobacco to the equation, and you've entered a new era of oral disaster. At first, nobody suspects a thing. Everyone's too busy worrying about plague, Spanish spies, and whether their ruff is big enough to obscure their chin. But then, slowly, the city's smiles start looking stranger. Once bright teeth turn a curious shade of taupe. By winter, they're more mottled than a hen's egg. By spring, people start to wonder if perhaps the fresh air of London isn't as fresh as advertised. You're not alone. Nobles and labourers alike discover that tobacco leaves more than a memory. Stains creep in at the edges, working their way across your smile like English ivy across a stone wall. Some claim it adds character, a sort of distressed look, like those expensive doublets from Florence. Others just stop showing their teeth entirely, favouring the tight-lipped, inscrutable grin that quickly becomes all the rage at court. Desperation breeds creativity. You experiment with every homemade remedy the city can offer. Crushed sage leaves, minty but ineffective. Ground charcoal, messy, slightly alarming. Even the classic chew a fresh stick and hope for the best, none of it works. A local apothecary suggests rubbing your teeth with rosemary and vinegar, and you give it a go, only to discover you now taste like a salad. The stains remain. You begin to suspect they're not stains at all, but the start of some Tudor evolutionary trait, the tobacco tooth. For the wealthy, solutions are more dramatic. Imported tooth powders appear in the apothecary shops, promising pearl-like brilliance. Ingredients include burnt eggshell, alum, and something called dragon's blood. You try not to ask questions. The powders cost a week's wages and make your gums tingle alarmingly. But you use them anyway, because you're running out of teeth you can safely show in public. Dental professionals, such as they are, offer more drastic options. Tooth pullers set up shop in the marketplace, waving terrifying iron instruments and calling out special deals. A penny a tooth, 2 for a farthing, free advice with every extraction. Their solution to stains? Remove the offending tooth. You watch a friend go in for a quick cleaning and come out with a mouthful of cotton and a look that says he's sworn off smiling forever. Some turn to disguise. The trend of painted teeth sweeps through London, with apothecaries selling tiny pots of tooth white and enamel rouge. Results are mixed. One poet's teeth begin to melt during an especially heated reading. Another courtier's mouth takes on a faintly blue tinge, leading to rumours he's been cursed. You consider fashioning a fake set out of seashells, but the memory of your cousin's pearl smile, lost mid-conversation, haunts you into resignation. Eventually, everyone adapts. The new etiquette is to keep your mouth shut in public. Laugh with your hand in front of your face, and avoid crunchy foods that could reveal the true state of your dental affairs. Friends trade stories of the great tobacco tooth disaster and commiserate over mugs of ale. The boldest among you just own it, flashing their haunted house smiles and daring anyone to comment. You find a strange freedom in it all. With everyone's teeth in such sorry shape, nobody judges anymore. The Queen's own smile is rumoured to be less than dazzling, and if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for you. Besides, in an age where plague, poverty, and politics can wipe you out before supper, worrying about a little dental discoloration feels almost luxurious. So you keep smoking, keep scrubbing, and keep smiling. Closed-mouthed, mysterious, and just a bit more historic than you'd planned. Welcome to the golden age of questionable grins. In Tudor England, nobody's smile is perfect. But at least now, neither is anyone else's. You attempt to flirt with a local merchant's daughter by offering her a taste of your imported blend. She laughs, accepts, and immediately coughs so hard she nearly passes out. You nod approvingly. True love in Tudor England is just finding someone whose cough matches yours. Courtship has always been complicated, but add tobacco into the mix, and it's suddenly an exercise in shared suffering. Forget sonnets and bouquets. Here, romance is forged in a haze of pipe smoke, awkward silences, and the occasional bout of near suffocation. The days of whispering sweet nothings in moonlit gardens have been replaced with competitive cloud blowing and the constant hope you're not about to set your sleeve on fire. Your romantic strategy, such as it is, involves the careful display of your pipe, long enough to impress, but not so long as to seem compensatory. You've chosen a blend rumoured to be favoured by Sir Walter Raleigh himself, or at least by someone who once saw Sir Walter Raleigh from a distance. You sidle up beside your intended, lean in conspiratorially, and offer a taste. This, you've been told, is the height of Tudor seduction, sharing tobacco that cost you a week's wages and, quite possibly, your sense of smell. The ritual is delicate. There's a certain etiquette to passing the pipe. Hold it just so. Try not to drop ashes on her skirt. And always light it for her first. It's a gesture of chivalry, or at the very least insurance against accusations of bad manners. She accepts with a smile, takes a cautious puff, and immediately erupts in a fit of coughing so dramatic that a passing apothecary offers her a restorative tonic. You beam with pride. If she returns for a second try, you know it's meant to be. Across London, couples are discovering the joys and hazards of tobacco-infused courtship. The smoke gives you an excuse to stand close, to whisper over the crackling of the pipe, to hide your nerves behind a well-timed exhale. A successful session means leaving the tavern together, breathless, eyes watering, but spirits high. A failed attempt usually involves an embarrassing choking fit, a ruined ruff, and the gentle comfort of your friends, who will mock you mercilessly for weeks. Flirting takes on new forms. The boldest suitors challenge each other to smoke rings, sending elaborate shapes drifting across candlelit rooms. Some claim that blowing a perfect heart-shaped ring is a sign of eternal devotion. Others argue that true love is surviving a night in the same bed after 3 pipes and a supper of onions. You practice in front of the mirror and manage something that looks like a question mark. You decide it's appropriate. Gifts become more creative too. Instead of flowers, you bring your sweetheart a pouch of the latest Spanish blend, tied with ribbon and accompanied by a poem about sweet embers and fiery glances. The words are terrible, but the gesture is appreciated, especially if the tobacco is real and not just dried parsley. Lovers trade pipes as tokens, inscribe initials in the stems, and compose songs about the way her hair smells faintly of campfire. Not everyone is impressed. Older relatives lament the loss of proper romance. Mothers grumble about the lingering scent in their parlors, and fathers worry about the cost of keeping their daughters supplied with quality leaf. Still, the trend grows. Even the Queen's courtiers are said to favor secret, smoky rendezvous in the palace gardens, their whispered flirtations obscured by drifting clouds and conveniently timed fits of coughing. Eventually, you settle into a comfortable routine. You and your chosen companion meet by the river, pipes in hand, content to share silences, stories, and the knowledge that your mutual addiction is, in its own way, deeply romantic. The world may judge, your teeth may suffer, and your lungs may object, but you found love in the smoke-filled alleys of Tudor England. And as every generation learns, love is rarely perfect. Sometimes it's awkward, often it's messy, and now and then it leaves you both gasping for air. But in the end, if you can cough, wheeze, and laugh together, you've already found something worth holding on to, especially if she lets you finish the last pinch from the pouch. Every week, another neighbor's house burns down. The cause? Careless pipe smokers and thatched roofs. The city starts posting fines for reckless ember deployment. You consider giving up. Instead, you buy a hat with a wider brim, Tudor England is not the place for anyone with a casual relationship to fire safety. You live in a world where homes are mostly timber and straw, roofs are thatched and flammable, and insurance is just hoping the wind blows in the other direction. The arrival of tobacco and its enthusiastic adopters, armed with pipes, tinderboxes, and a devil-may-care attitude, means London now glows like a firefly at dusk. If it isn't plague or politics that gets you, it's the unmistakable sound of a neighbour yelling, "Fire!" while sprinting down the lane in his nightshirt. Let's break down the science. A smouldering ember, a well-oiled doublet, and a poorly timed sneeze is all it takes to turn your average Tudor dwelling into a cautionary tale. Pipes spill ash with every puff. Some, especially the longer, fancier pipes, act like tiny catapults, launching sparks into laps, tablecloths, and, on a particularly memorable occasion, the Lord Mayor's toupee. You witness the aftermath: singed eyebrows, panicked chickens, and at least 3 men blaming the incident on a sudden gust. Attempts to mitigate the chaos are mixed at best. The City Council, always several disasters behind the curve, posts proclamations on every door: no smoking near thatch, pipes outside only. And, the always optimistic, embers to be extinguished at all times. These are ignored almost immediately. Your landlord nails a bucket of sand to the front step for pipe disposal. Within hours, it's been stolen and repurposed as a footbath for the neighbour's dog. Word spreads that some houses are now installing fireproof roof tiles imported from Italy. But these cost more than the house itself. Most settle for hanging damp rags near the hearth and praying that Saint Florian, the patron saint of firefighters, has room on his schedule. The bravest, or most foolish, insist on smoking indoors, arguing that the rain will ruin the flavour. The rest develop a sixth sense for sudden warmth, suspicious glows, and the faint smell of singed rough. The consequences are as comic as they are tragic. Every fire brings out the whole street, buckets in hand, sleeves rolled up, ready to gossip as much as to help. Children cheer at the spectacle. Old men shout advice from windows. One resourceful baker claims to have saved his oven by smothering the flames with yesterday's bread. You do your part, mostly by staying out of the way and vowing, again, to be more careful with your own embers. It doesn't help that most Tudor homes are packed tightly together, making every blaze a neighbourhood event. The smoke attracts the town watch, who show up too late to do much beyond asking whose fault it was and collecting the aforementioned fines. At least once a month, someone is sentenced to public embarrassment, usually by being forced to parade through the market with a soot-stained placard reading "Reckless with Fire." You consider your own track record and resolve to keep your matches close and your excuses closer. There are, of course, the clever and the lucky. You hear of a merchant who invents the ember-catching bib, a strip of leather tied around the neck to intercept falling sparks. It doesn't catch on, mostly because it looks ridiculous, and after 2 pints, nobody remembers to wear it. A famous poet, not to be outdone, claims his latest work was inspired by the purifying power of fire. Critics note that his house burned down 2 nights before publication. Still, the threat does little to slow the march of progress. Or of pipe smokers. Every tavern and alleyway is filled with cautious optimists, convinced they can outwit fate with a well-placed hat or a practiced flick of the wrist. The fires may come and go, but the habit, like the city, endures. So you keep puffing, keep dodging embers, and keep one eye on the door. Because in Tudor England, survival means mastering both the flame and the fine art of pretending you meant to set your neighbour's chicken coop alight. Enter the tavern. Part pub, part indoor smoke cloud. The floor is sticky, the air is dense, and the clientele consists entirely of men in various stages of inebriation. You can barely see the far end of the room. You order a pint and pretend you can still taste anything. If the streets of Tudor London are a chaos of noise, mud, and missed chamber pots, the tavern is a chaos of noise, smoke, and missed opportunities. It's where you go to lose yourself after a hard day, to avoid your landlord, or to find out what everyone else thinks about your hat. But these days, the most defining feature isn't the cheap ale or the rotting cheese. It's the unmistakable, omnipresent haze of tobacco. Stepping inside is like entering a new world, where every conversation is muffled by clouds and every face is half obscured. Men of every class gather here. Apprentices with pockets full of hope, old soldiers with stories and scars, poets reciting verse to anyone who will listen, and quite a few who won't. The tables are crowded with tankards, dice, and pipes. Always pipes, clay, wood, long, short, and occasionally improvised from whatever was left in the alley outside. There are rules here, though nobody ever wrote them down. If someone offers you a pipe, you accept it, regardless of what it smells like. If you cough, you do so politely into your sleeve, then immediately swear it's just the weather. If you drop ash on someone's boots, you buy the next round. And if you complain about the smoke, you're invited to sit by the open window, which in January is a punishment reserved for the truly annoying. Taverns have always been places for news and gossip, but now tobacco has given them a whole new set of rituals. Pipes are passed like peace offerings. New blends are sampled and debated with the seriousness of a royal treaty. Someone claims to have imported a pinch of Spanish leaf smuggled in by mermaids. Another swears his blend is favoured by the Queen herself, though he can't quite remember where he heard that. Nobody cares about the truth, only the performance. You do your best to fit in. You try to keep your doublet free of stray embers and avoid sitting directly beneath the swinging lantern. One rogue spark and the whole table could go up in a burst of flames and accusations. The regulars know every trick: tamping down ash with the end of a knife, knocking out a stubborn bowl against the heel of a boot, and blowing smoke rings with impressive aim, usually in the direction of anyone who's just entered. Of course, the real draw of the smoking tavern isn't the tobacco itself, but the sense of belonging. Here you can argue politics, complain about taxes, or declare undying love for the barmaid without anyone remembering a word in the morning. You share your stories and your smokes, your failures and your feeble attempts at humour, and leave with the knowledge that at least someone laughed at your joke, even if it was just the dog. Not everyone is a fan. The city authorities grumble about the public nuisance of persistent haze. Preachers warn that too much time in the tavern leads to idleness, sin, and breath most foul. You nod along and promise to reform, but everyone knows you'll be back tomorrow, partly for the company, partly for the drink, and mostly because it's the only place you can finish a sentence without someone throwing cabbage. You emerge after a few hours blinking into the daylight, your clothes carrying the scent of 100 shared puffs, your head buzzing with stories you'll soon forget. You wonder if you'll ever taste anything but smoke again. It hardly matters. In the rising world of the smoking tavern, flavor is just another memory, and the future is thick with possibility, and, naturally, more smoke. In Tudor England, the tavern isn't just a place to drink. It's a refuge, a rumour mill, and a rolling, roaring testament to the unbreakable human desire to share a bad habit with good company. Officially, smoking is for men. Unofficially, half the women in London have pipes hidden in their aprons. You catch your aunt sneaking a drag in the garden. She threatens to tell your mother unless you fetch her more tobacco. You make a note. The true power brokers are always the ones with spare matches. Welcome to the unspoken society of Tudor tobacco women, a network more organized than the Queen's spies and twice as resourceful. While preachers thunder from the pulpit about the dangers of manly vices, the kitchens, gardens, and laundry yards of London are swirling with their own quiet plumes. If men are busy competing over who can exhale the largest cloud, women have turned smoking into an art of discretion, negotiation, and, when necessary, blackmail. For every public law or church warning about the dangers of female smoking, there's an equally creative workaround. A lace-trimmed handkerchief can hide a pipe or snuff box. A well-timed cough covers the strike of a match. Friends gather for tea, which quickly becomes tea and a taste. The kitchen door left just slightly ajar for ventilation. The firebank neatly swept of all evidence before the menfolk return. If caught, the explanations are endless. I was chasing a rat, the bread burned, or, most daringly, it must be the neighbour's smoke drifting over the wall. Your aunt, it turns out, is not alone. The butcher's wife keeps a pouch of Spanish leaf tied to her garter. The midwife, always in demand, accepts payment in coin or tobacco, for nerves, she explains. Even the vicar's housekeeper, outwardly pious, has a secret compartment in her sewing basket. You quickly learn not to underestimate anyone who spends her days stoking fires and her evenings making sure nobody else gets the last pinch from the family stash. Of course, there's scandal. Some say that tobacco ruins women's virtue, their complexion, and their chances at marriage. A particularly dramatic pamphlet warns that the female frame is too delicate for such fierce vapors. Meanwhile, your cousin Eleanor, who outdrinks most sailors, laughs so hard she nearly chokes on her pipe. The louder the warnings, the more creative the cover stories become. Fevers, fainting spells, mysterious vapors, all can be soothed, it's claimed, by just a taste of imported leaf. The market for tobacco accessories is, unsurprisingly, thriving. While men favor ostentatious pipes and engraved tins, women's supplies are discreet and clever. Tiny pipes that tuck into the folds of a skirt, snuff boxes disguised as brooches, scented sachets to mask the smell. A resourceful apothecary does a brisk trade in floral pipe covers, which are sold as moth-repellent but work equally well to fool a suspicious mother-in-law. At home, the rules are quietly rewritten. After supper, the men retire to the parlour to boast and cough. The women gather in the kitchen, swap gossip, and compare blends. Alliances are formed and broken based on who brings the best tobacco or whose husband can be convinced to accidentally leave his pouch on the mantel. Sharing is not only expected, it's essential. One woman's shortage is everyone's crisis. The unlucky are dispatched on midnight errands to fetch herbs from a sympathetic neighbour with a spare stash. Romance, too, is complicated by tobacco. Suitors who insist smoking is no habit for ladies find themselves eating supper alone. A thoughtful man brings not just flowers but a fresh supply of imported leaf, ideally the good stuff, not whatever's been swept off the tavern floor. Some couples share secret signals. A wink, a gesture toward the garden gate, a brief disappearance into the shadows. True love, in this world, is a spare match, and the last puff from the pipe. Over time, the secret becomes less secret, and the scandal less scandalous. Even the most judgmental neighbours learn that it's safer to look the other way than risk the collective wrath of London's best-connected women. You discover that, in the long run, tobacco is less about rebellion and more about resilience, a tiny act of independence in a world that would rather pretend you didn't exist at all. So you keep the secret, fetch the leaf, and make sure you never run out of matches. Because in Tudor England, power comes in many forms. And sometimes, it's just the right to enjoy a quiet smoke behind the garden wall. Sunday service is interrupted by a fire and brimstone sermon about the dangers of tobacco. You nod along solemnly while quietly plotting your next pipe break. The preacher coughs dramatically. Irony is alive and well. Tudor England is no stranger to a good moral panic, and tobacco has quickly become public enemy number one for the pious and paranoid. No matter that only last year the great worry was dancing, or minstrels, or women who read too many books. This year, it's the smoke, the devil's breath, as the preacher calls it, curling up from pipes in the taverns, the streets, and, scandal of scandals, even the churchyard itself. You sit in your pew, eyes fixed on the pulpit, while the preacher works himself into a righteous lather. His voice cracks as he warns the flock that tobacco weakens the soul, blackens the lungs, and tempts the mind toward idle amusements. Every vice in Tudor England, from gossip to gout, is now blamed on foreign leaves. You exchange a look with your neighbor, who is chewing his hat brim in an effort not to laugh. The sermon takes on a theatrical air. The preacher paces, waving a blackened pipe as both prop and evidence. He recalls the day he first smelled the accursed weed, a moment he likens to the fall of man. He warns of mothers abandoning children for the lure of a smoky puff, husbands squandering fortunes for one more taste, and the streets overflowing with the hazy reek of temptation. A few parishioners gasp. You bite your lip and try to appear suitably alarmed, though you can't help noticing the bishop in the front row is twirling a snuff box behind his hymn book. Fire and brimstone are only half the show. The preacher also doles out science, or at least what passes for it in 1587. He quotes a pamphlet that claims tobacco will turn the tongue black, shrink the heart, and make men forget their prayers. A hand-painted diagram is held up for all to see. A skull with smoke pouring from its sockets. You wonder if anyone realizes the drawing is upside down. Between warnings, the preacher coughs, sniffles, and wipes his nose on his sleeve. Each fit is followed by a dramatic glare at the congregation, as if daring someone to offer him a pipe. It's the kind of performance that makes you want to both repent and roll your eyes. After the service, parishioners file out in somber silence, only to gather in the churchyard for a quiet word, which, for half the congregation, is code for anyone got a light? Outside, the gossip takes on new urgency. Mothers compare notes on who's been seen with a suspiciously fragrant cloak. Old men grumble that the preacher used to be fun at parties, before he started worrying about everyone's immortal lungs. A group of boys dare each other to sneak a smoke behind the vestry, arguing over which saint protects against both plague and parental wrath. You keep your own counsel, hands deep in your pockets, eyes on the sky, waiting for the coast to clear. By the afternoon, the panic has faded. The pious have gone home. The preacher has retired to nurse his throat with honey and, rumor has it, a pinch of snuff. Meanwhile, the taverns fill up again, their windows fogged with laughter and the ever-present haze. Someone raises a glass to the preacher, thanking him for reminding us to enjoy our vices while we still can. The whole room laughs, coughs, and orders another round. As evening falls, you reflect on the day's warnings. Sin, it seems, is a moving target. One year it's ale, the next it's tobacco, and before long it'll be something else entirely. Long hair, maybe, or loud shoes. You light your pipe, watch the smoke curl away, and decide that, all things considered, you'd rather risk damnation than another hour of self-righteous sermons. In Tudor England, moral panic burns hot, but tobacco burns longer, and when the two collide, the only sensible thing to do is slip out the side door, find your friends, and enjoy the sweet relief of a well-earned puff. Salvation, for now, in every exhale. At court, gifting the right tobacco blend can win you a friend, a favor, or at least a seat near the fire. Unfortunately, gifting the wrong blend can get you exiled, mocked, or forced to explain why your pouch smells like moldy socks. Tudor court is a game of appearances, and tobacco, is the new ace up everyone's embroidered sleeve. Every social interaction is now an elaborate dance, with pipes and pouches taking center stage. It's not just about having tobacco, it's about having the right tobacco, imported, rare, and ideally delivered with the kind of dramatic flair that suggests you have powerful friends and even more powerful secrets. Blends become currency. The best are reserved for the highest-ranking nobles, Queen's Delight, Sir Walter's Reserve, Spanish Dream. You hear whispers of a mysterious golden Virginian that's supposedly cured with honey and aged in the shadow of the tower. You're pretty sure that's just a poetic way of saying it was stored in a dark cupboard for too long. Regardless, every courtier wants a taste, and more than one friendship has been sealed or shattered over the contents of a humble tobacco pouch. Gift-giving is an art form. A pouch of tobacco, carefully wrapped in silk and tied with a ribbon, can be the key to a favor, a timely introduction, or a reprieve from the Queen's bad mood. But beware, court is a nest of spies, flatterers, and professional critics. Gift the wrong blend, and you risk humiliation. Lord Dudley still hasn't lived down the time he presented a pouch that reeked of damp straw to the master of the revels. The resulting snickers haunted him through 3 royal banquets and at least 1 masked ball. Of course, the flattery flows both ways. Accepting a gift gracefully is just as important as choosing one. Too much enthusiasm, and you look desperate. Too little, and you offend the giver. The true masters of courtly tobacco culture can accept a pouch with the perfect combination of gratitude, indifference, and subtle suspicion. Bonus points if you can drop a comment about last year's harvest being particularly smoky. Or if you can name-drop a Spanish grandee who prefers a pinch of English leaf, but only on Tuesdays. Tobacco tastings become a new form of entertainment. After supper, nobles gather by the fire, pipes in hand, and compare notes with the solemnity of wine critics. Hints of rose petal, someone murmurs. A suggestion of oak and tragedy, says another. The Queen's jester, never one to miss an opportunity, pipes up. This one reminds me of the time my uncle's barn caught fire. The nobles laugh, but you notice a few discreetly empty their pipes. Behind all the posturing, intrigue simmers. The right tobacco can open doors. A rare blend slipped to a court official can ensure your petition finds its way to the top of the pile. A pipe shared with a rival might lead to a sudden, strategic alliance. And a coincidentally empty pouch at the right moment can signal everything from let's plot to please. For the love of God, don't let me sit next to the Queen's cousin again. There are, inevitably, disasters. You witness a lady-in-waiting gift, the Queen, a pouch that, upon opening, fills the air with a scent best described as maritime tragedy. The Queen's nostrils flare. The court falls silent. Within moments, the unfortunate gift-giver is reassigned to oversee the royal laundries. A fate worse than exile, given the state of courtly undergarments. Word spreads quickly. Always check your tobacco before gifting. And never trust a blend named after a sea creature. Despite the risks, the rewards are real. A well-timed gift, a compliment on someone's robust and spicy bouquet, or a casual offer to share your pipe can buy you a moment in the Queen's good graces. Or at least keep your enemies guessing. The cleverest courtiers master the language of tobacco, trading pouches and secrets with equal skill. And so you play the game. You taste, you trade, you smile at every backhanded compliment about your unusual palate. In a court where everything is a test, tobacco is just one more way to climb, charm, and survive. Provided you don't accidentally gift a pouch of moldy socks to the wrong person. If you do, remember, a hasty retreat and a well-timed joke may be your only hope. The high price of legal tobacco means smugglers are thriving. You hear tales of pirates off Cornwall, barrels of tobacco disguised as cod, and daring raids on Spanish galleons. You dream of running away to sea, but remember you get seasick in the bath. Smuggling has become England's favourite cottage industry, second only to complaining about the weather. The Crown does its best to tax, regulate, and occasionally confiscate every last pinch of tobacco that makes it through the docks. But where there's a law, there's an enterprising soul ready to bend it. Enter the tobacco pirates, half hero, half menace. All sinus-clogging bravado. Let's set sail. Picture the Cornish coast, jagged rocks, howling winds, and ships bobbing in the grey, suspiciously loaded with fish. Only, you notice, the barrels seem far too heavy for cod and smell less like the sea and more like a tavern at closing time. Local fishermen, tight-lipped and generous with their winks, offload their catch with practiced efficiency. By the time the customs officer wanders down the quay, half the cargo is already in a hidden cellar, sold to the innkeeper's brother, who will redistribute it around town for the right price, and a promise not to mention it to the vicar. The stories grow with every telling. Someone's cousin claims to have seen a pirate crew off the Scilly Isles, their sails patched with stolen ruffs, barrels of Spanish tobacco stashed below decks. Another swears that smugglers disguise themselves as monks, rowing barrels upriver under cover of darkness, chanting prayers and passing flasks of contraband to local lords. You nod and pretend to be shocked, though you suspect most of the city's miraculous recoveries from illness have more to do with these pirates than with divine intervention. The methods are ingenious. Some smugglers coat their tobacco in honey, disguising it as apothecary's blend for medicinal use. Others sew pouches into the linings of cloaks, double-bottom carts, or even hollowed-out loaves of bread. The city's best black market bakers can slip a week's supply into a single, oversized roll. The more creative the method, the more legendary the smuggler. In the taverns, these outlaws are half Robin Hood, half arsonist, and entirely admired by anyone who's ever paid full price for a legal pouch. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. The authorities do their best to keep up, posting guards at the docks, offering rewards for informers, and occasionally making a very public example out of a captured smuggler. The spectacle draws a crowd, children jeer, old women tut, and someone inevitably lights a pipe in solidarity. Let he who is without tobacco cast the first stone, someone quips. The crowd roars with laughter, and the guards roll their eyes, knowing full well that tomorrow the whole business will start again. Piracy becomes both a livelihood and a legend. Songs are sung about the infamous Captain Blacklung, who supposedly once held up a Spanish galleon with nothing but a cutlass and a box of matches. Another ballad tells of Mad Maggie of Minehead, who smuggled tobacco into London sewn inside her petticoats and single-handedly outwitted 3 customs men and a very confused goose. Everyone has a story, and most are only slightly exaggerated. The demand never fades. London's appetite for cheap tobacco is insatiable, and every port, river, and alleyway offers a new opportunity for profit or disaster. You dream of a life at sea, trading pouches for adventure, but reality intervenes. You recall your last ferry crossing, green, miserable, clutching your hat as the boat rocked gently in the breeze. The romance of piracy vanishes as you remember the taste of your own breakfast, twice, so you settle for tales and the occasional pinch of pirate's blend, savoring the thrill of rebellion without ever leaving shore. The city hums with the excitement of forbidden goods, and even the Queen's spies are rumored to turn a blind eye now and then. After all, who can resist a bargain? In Tudor England, smuggling isn't just a crime. It's a way of life, a badge of cunning, and the only thing standing between you and bankruptcy. You take another puff, raise a glass to the pirates, and thank your lucky stars for the brave souls willing to risk it all for a few leaves and a lot of glory. As long as the crown keeps taxing, the smugglers will keep sailing, and the stories, like the smoke, will drift on forever. The family recipe book now includes helpful advice. For headache, apply a poultice of pipe ash. You try it, you regret it. Meanwhile, your neighbor claims to have cured his gout by stuffing dried leaves in his shoes. You suspect he just wants to smell like everyone else. In Tudor England, the line between medicine and mischief is a thin one. Every ailment, from a mild headache to the sort of rash that makes people change pews at church, is an invitation for creative home remedies, preferably those involving whatever's in the pantry or, lately, in the pipe. The arrival of tobacco has inspired a whole new chapter of family cures, passed down with pride, confusion, and often a complete disregard for basic biology. Your aunt insists that a good pipe in the morning wards off the vapors, which, by her definition, includes everything from bad dreams to minor existential crises. She lights up before breakfast, wafting her smoke into the corners of the house and, incidentally, into your porridge. If anyone sneezes, the solution is more tobacco, less fuss. You're not convinced, but after your third day of waking up with a head full of fog, you wonder if she's onto something or if you're just too tired to care. Soon, the whole neighborhood is bustling with advice. For toothache, rub your gums with tobacco juice. For earache, blow smoke gently into the offending ear. You observe as a friend's father solemnly sits by the fire, head tilted, while his youngest son attempts to exhale medicinal smoke into his left ear. The result is twofold: no improvement in hearing, and the strong suspicion that the entire house now smells like a bonfire in a brewery. Skin problems? There's a remedy for that too. Mash the leaves, mix with animal fat, and apply directly to the rash. It's a strategy equally effective for driving away itching and attracting the neighbor's dog, who follows you around all day hoping for a taste. If it stings, it means it's working, according to your grandmother. If it doesn't sting, she adds more tobacco. No one can agree if these remedies actually work. Some say tobacco draws out the bad humors, while others swear it merely distracts you from your original problem by introducing a new and exciting form of discomfort. The barber surgeon, ever eager to keep up with trends, begins recommending tobacco poultices for sprains, bruises, and marital discord. You try a compress for a stubbed toe, only to discover it mostly leaves a brown stain and a faint urge to take up pipe smoking yourself. The most popular cure by far is for melancholy, what we'd now call feeling glum. But in Tudor times is a diagnosis taken very seriously. The remedy: a pinch of snuff, inhaled with enough force to trigger a sneeze so satisfying it's rumored to expel not only sadness, but also bad spirits. Your uncle swears by it, claiming he hasn't felt blue since last Michaelmas. Though you notice he's also taken to wearing 2 pairs of socks and singing to the cat. There's no shortage of snake oil salesmen ready to cash in on this wellness craze. The local apothecary sells a tobacco elixir for aches of the head, heart, or wallet. Street hawkers peddle mysterious smoking balls guaranteed to cure everything except common sense. Even the town's midwife gets in on the action, recommending smoked leaves for childbirth pains, though her clients seem more interested in the distraction than the cure. Of course, not every attempt is a success. Your own experiments with tobacco eye compresses end in watery eyes and accusations of witchcraft. The neighbor's gout remains stubborn, despite the fragrant state of his shoes. Still, the ritual continues, because in a world with few real cures, hope and habit go hand in hand. As evening falls and the last embers fade in your pipe, you reflect on the miracle of Tudor medicine. If it doesn't work, at least you're too distracted to care. And who knows? Perhaps one day, someone will invent a remedy that's less about smoke and more about science. Until then, there's always pipe ash, a poultice, and a story to tell. The Joneses of Tudor England are the Willoughbys next door, who have a new pipe and an imported stash every month. Your own supply is dwindling. You consider switching to snuff, but fear the social consequences. You borrow a pipe, then a pouch, then someone's entire personality. In a world where almost everyone is dirty, tired, and half convinced the rats are plotting something, you'd think the English would have bigger worries than whose pipe is fanciest. But social pressure is as old as the plague, and tobacco envy has reached fever pitch. You peer over the garden wall as Mr. Willoughby displays his latest acquisition. A pipe so long it needs its own walking stick, carved from rare wood and allegedly smoked by a Spanish admiral. Mrs. Willoughby sighs dramatically and claims her tobacco was picked by moonlight and blessed by a Portuguese monk. You nod politely, secretly wondering if she just spilled lavender in last week's blend. The struggle is real. Every trip to the tavern becomes a masterclass in status anxiety. Your own pipe, cracked and chipped from last winter's frost, looks increasingly tragic compared to the glittering assortment on display at the next table. You do your best to hide it up your sleeve, but your friends notice anyway. Lost your pipe again? They tease, while showing off the new silver-tipped model gifted by an uncle just back from Cadiz. The real pain comes when the pouch is open. The Willoughby's stash is dark, fragrant, and carefully packed. Yours is down to crumbs, so dry it crackles. You ration what's left, packing the bowl sparingly and pretending you prefer a subtler flavor. The pressure mounts as you watch others pass around blends with exotic names: Golden Virginia, Royal Reserve, Caribbean Storm. You cough politely and reach for your own pouch, only to discover it's empty again. So, you adapt. You become the great borrower of your age. One day it's a quick pinch from your neighbor, who obliges with a smile, but then spends the rest of the week reminding everyone. Another day, it's a short loan of a pipe, which somehow turns into a standing arrangement, until you realize you've started mimicking the Willoughbys' cough and their preference for dramatics. A friend accuses you of stealing his laugh. You deny it while practicing in the mirror. Tobacco envy fuels a new level of creativity. You experiment with makeshift blends: nettle leaves, apple peel, even a dried petal from the garden. Results range from surprisingly tolerable to never again. A particularly desperate night finds you scraping the inside of an old pouch for seasoned flavor. You tell yourself it's artisanal. Your lungs disagree. Keeping up appearances extends beyond smoking. You pick up on new trends: how to hold a pipe just so, how to knock the ash out with a flourish, how to look unimpressed by even the most ostentatious displays of imported leaf. The truly skilled smokers manage an expression of faint boredom, as if they've been enjoying rare blends since the womb. You try it and end up looking constipated. Social pressure hits hardest when the invitations come. The Willoughbys host a tobacco tasting, complete with imported blends, delicate pipes, and enough self-satisfaction to fill the tower. You attend, smile at all the right moments, and do your best to avoid actually tasting anything. By the end of the evening, you've agreed to buy a share in the next import, signed up for a waiting list, and committed to a year's worth of small talk about notes of cinnamon. Underneath it all, everyone's pretending. The Willoughbys grumble in private about the cost. Your neighbor's exclusive blend is just last week's shipment relabeled. You realize, with relief, that nobody really knows what they're doing. You all just want to fit in, even if it means borrowing, bluffing, or developing a sudden passion for pipe maintenance. So you carry on, patching your old pipe, spinning stories about your secret sauce, and hoping nobody notices when you borrow their lighter again. Because in Tudor England, it isn't about the tobacco, it's about keeping up appearances, one puff, one pose, and one borrowed pouch at a time. And if you accidentally borrow someone's personality along the way, well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Just don't let the Willoughbys catch you at it. You catch the local kids trading pipes behind the alehouse. They claim it's for practice, and that Sir Francis Drake started younger. You report them to their mothers. Their mothers already smoke. Welcome to the Tudor version of Just Say No, where the only anti-smoking campaign is your neighbour scolding her son for stealing her favourite clay pipe. In a world where adults puff away at every opportunity, it's no wonder the children want in on the fun, or at least want to mimic the adults, with all the seriousness that only a 7-year-old can muster while blowing imaginary smoke rings. The alleyway behind the alehouse has become the unofficial training ground for the next generation of England's puffers. Here, under the watchful eye of absolutely no one, groups of children swap pipes, compare blends, and practice the time-honored art of looking mysterious. Someone has managed to smuggle a pinch of actual tobacco, but most rely on dried leaves, bits of hay, or whatever they can find on the ground. The results are predictably tragic and deeply hilarious. Hacking coughs, teary eyes, and the occasional tumble into a puddle. You do your civic duty. You march up to the nearest mother, prepared to sound the alarm about this budding epidemic of youthful vice. She listens with a knowing smile, and then points out that young Tom's cough matches hers exactly. Another mother shrugs and says, "Better they learn now before they ruin a good rug." It seems the cycle is complete. The children imitate the adults, who, in turn, remember their own not-so-innocent experiments with forbidden smoke. If there's any pushback, it's only because the children are wasting perfectly good tobacco. You overhear a heated argument. "You used all the Spanish blend? That was for guests." Warnings about the dangers of smoking are mixed with practical advice. Don't drop ashes on your best shirt. Don't smoke inside unless you want to scrub the walls. And above all, don't get caught stealing from your grandmother's stash. She's the most ruthless enforcer in the neighborhood. Some children take their role as future smokers very seriously. They practice holding the pipe at the right angle, imitating the aloof expressions of the most respected elders. They hold competitions, who can fake the deepest, most dramatic sigh, who can blow the perfect smoke ring, even if it's just steam from a hot cup of broth. A few dream of joining the Navy, convinced that a proper sailor's career can't begin until you've smoked your first real pinch before the age of 10. Sir Francis Drake, after all, was probably smoking pipes before he could walk. Or so the legend goes. The schoolyard becomes a microcosm of the adult world, tobacco envy, peer pressure, and the fierce pride of someone who's managed to sneak a real imported blend from their father's drawer. Of course, the adults are no better. You spot more than one parent sneaking a taste from the practice stash when they think no one is looking. And at least one teacher quietly encourages responsible puffing, mainly to keep the children distracted during Latin lessons. Naturally, the preachers are horrified. Every Sunday, a stern warning is issued about the corruption of youth, blaming tobacco for everything from poor handwriting to skipped chores. The children listen, nod, and then race outside to continue their experiments. You suspect the preacher himself keeps a secret stash behind the altar, judging by the lingering scent of smoke and the telltale stains on his surplice. By the end of the week, you've given up trying to stop them. Instead, you provide a few pointers: how to avoid singeing your eyebrows, the importance of sharing, and why you should never, ever try to light a pipe indoors when your mother is napping. The next generation of smokers is in good hands, learning the family trade with all the enthusiasm, mischief, and questionable judgment of youth. So the tradition continues, passed from parent to child, from alleyway to alehouse, wrapped in secrecy, laughter, and just a little bit of smoke. In Tudor England, the circle of life is less about lions and more about the endless pursuit of the perfect puff, one misadventure at a time. England's not alone. Across the Channel, the French are inventing new ways to look disdainful while smoking. The Spanish are smug about discovering tobacco first, but mostly just argue about whether it should be taxed or banned. You join a debate, no one wins. The age of exploration is really the age of arguing about who did everything first. And when it comes to tobacco, every country wants the credit, the profits, or, at the very least, the last word. England prides itself on turning any new habit into a status symbol, but even the grandest courtier must acknowledge that the Spanish brought tobacco to Europe from the New World. Of course, the Spanish version of this story involves gold, glory, and a lot more hand-waving. Spanish merchants and nobles act like they personally discovered every plant, animal, and slightly menacing insect in the Americas. Their tobacco is always the finest, their pipes the longest, their methods of curing and blending the most advanced. This leaf, a visiting Don proclaims, was smoked by the Viceroy of Peru while negotiating a peace treaty with his enemies. The English nod politely, then immediately claim their own stash was smoked by Queen Elizabeth herself during a particularly stressful family dinner. Meanwhile, the French are busy turning tobacco into an art form. Paris is full of philosophers and poets lounging in public squares, cultivating an air of ennui and exhaling perfect spirals of smoke. The French have mastered the art of looking unimpressed at both the tobacco and the people who dare to discuss it. Manon, they sigh, our blends are subtler, more refined. We do not puff, we savor. The English try to imitate this, but mostly end up coughing, which the French find endlessly amusing. Debate is the true sport of the age, and nowhere is this more obvious than in the taverns, salons, and parliaments of Europe. Should tobacco be celebrated as a miracle, banned as a vice, or simply taxed until nobody can afford to enjoy it? In Spain, royal officials see tobacco as a golden goose, profitable, popular, and easier to control than the local nobility. Taxes rise and fall with the political winds, and contraband tobacco becomes the smuggler's favorite cargo. The French, for their part, can't agree on anything except that their tobacco is better. One day it's prescribed for migraines, the next day it's blamed for moral decay. The court doctors argue that tobacco smoke lifts the spirits and clarifies the mind, especially after a particularly long sermon or a bad bottle of wine. But just as quickly, a new pamphlet appears warning of the dangers. It dries the blood, dulls the senses, and leads to daydreaming. The king shrugs and orders another pipe. England, stuck between Spanish pride and French disdain, does what it does best: argues, imitates, and invents ever more elaborate reasons why their own tobacco rituals are superior. In court, a Spanish blend is the height of fashion one week, the next it's French snuff in tiny gilded boxes. Everyone claims to prefer something imported, but nobody admits that most of it comes from the same anonymous warehouse near the docks. The great tobacco debate infects daily life. At your local tavern, you find yourself defending English blends to a French merchant and a Spanish priest. The argument quickly devolves into a contest over who can blow the largest smoke ring and who can deliver the driest insult. Points are awarded for style, wit, and creative use of the word aromatic. No winner is declared. You leave with your pride intact, but your lungs thoroughly tested. Behind the rivalry, a strange camaraderie forms. For all their differences, smokers across Europe share the same obsessions: the perfect leaf, the smoothest blend, the endless parade of new rituals and old warnings. At the end of the day, everyone wants to relax, gossip, and forget about the taxes. even if it means pretending to enjoy a blend that tastes faintly of shoe polish. So you raise your pipe, salute your continental rivals, and puff away in the universal language of stubborn pleasure. Because in the end, the only thing more enduring than a bad habit is the argument over whose bad habit is best. A scholar from Oxford claims tobacco is a gift from God, citing a recent experiment involving a frog and a candle. You attend his lecture. The conclusion: possibly beneficial, possibly fatal. More research needed. You take notes. You understand nothing. Welcome to the brave new world of Tudor science, where a white beard and an embroidered cap are all you need to be considered an expert. Tobacco, the latest subject of scientific fascination, is examined, debated, and dissected by a procession of earnest men in frilly collars who have never let lack of evidence interfere with their conclusions. The result? A dizzying mix of wild optimism, cheerful confusion, and deeply unhelpful advice. Your first introduction to tobacco studies is at the town's public hall, where scholars from Oxford and Cambridge compete for attention. The Oxford man, a notorious show-off, rolls out his research apparatus. A frog, a length of pipe, and a candle borrowed from the local vicar. The frog appears unenthused, and you suspect it has participated in this lecture more than once. The demonstration begins. The learned scholar solemnly puffs smoke through the pipe, directing it at the frog, who blinks twice and then falls asleep. The audience gasps. Is this proof of tobacco's medicinal value? Or just an exhausted amphibian in need of a nap? The scholar declares it conclusive, and everyone claps, except for the frog, who is carried off stage with an air of resignation. Another scholar, this one from Cambridge, claims tobacco is dangerous, perhaps even the cause of modern laziness. His experiment involves setting a bowl of tobacco next to a caged sparrow, then observing the bird's general attitude toward life. After 10 minutes, the sparrow looks mildly annoyed, which he insists is evidence enough. Clearly, the plant possesses powerful properties, most of which are best avoided. A pamphlet is published and quickly ignored. In university halls, the debate rages. Some scholars swear that tobacco clears the mind and brightens the eyes. They point to recent discoveries in Italy, where a physician claims to have cured his migraines by sniffing tobacco powder. Others insist it brings nothing but coughs and confusion, referencing stories from France where entire salons of philosophers lost the thread of their conversations after one too many pipes. At home, you try to apply the new scientific wisdom. For headaches, try a light smoke, unless you read a different pamphlet, which warns this will imbalance your humors and invite melancholy. For insomnia, Cambridge says to avoid tobacco, Oxford says to double your dose, and your grandmother says to ignore them both and drink warm beer. The contradictions multiply. Some experiments say tobacco wards off the plague. Others claim it invites a slow, lingering doom. A local apothecary publishes his own findings, which mostly seem to justify the price of his latest snuff blend. You attend another lecture, this one promising definitive results. The speaker spends 40 minutes talking about frogs, never once mentioning tobacco, and finishes by selling a cure-all tonic made from rosewater, honey, and hope. The public, for their part, is none the wiser. Most people are happy to trust whatever theory best fits their current craving. If you want to smoke, you cite the Oxford man's frog. If you want to abstain, you reference the Cambridge sparrow. If you're unsure, you do both, hedging your bets with a glass of ale and a prayer. Even the Queen's own physician is rumoured to have a secret opinion. In private, he advises moderation, unless immoderation is required for social reasons. In public, he nods wisely and changes the subject. By the end of the year, the town has heard so many lectures and read so many pamphlets that no one remembers which side they're on. You look down at your notes, Possibly beneficial, possibly fatal. More research needed. It's the spirit of the age, uncertain, ambitious, and more than a little absurd. And so, in true Tudor fashion, you keep smoking, keep debating, and keep hoping that the next frog or sparrow will finally give you a clear answer. Until then, science remains a cloud of good intentions, thick, fragrant, and full of holes. A bad year for shipping means tobacco is suddenly worth more than gold. Panic buying ensues. Fights break out at the docks. You try smoking dried parsley. It's not the same. There's nothing like a shortage to turn ordinary vices into acts of desperation. In Tudor England, this means watching your precious supply of tobacco dwindle while the city's collective mood sinks lower than the Thames at low tide. It begins with rumors. The ships are delayed, the weather's been foul, Spanish pirates are prowling the channel, or someone in customs developed a sudden taste for confiscated cargo. Nobody knows the truth. Everyone agrees it's a disaster. You see the first signs at the market. Prices creep upward, then leap. The same pouch that cost a day's wages last week is now a month's rent. Merchants invent increasingly wild stories to justify their prices. Direct from the New World, carried by Swan, blessed by 3 bishops, one proclaims. Another claims his tobacco was protected from rot by being stored in the captain's boot, though this does not improve its aroma. Desperation sets in. The regulars at your favorite tavern begin hoarding, tucking away precious pinches for a rainy day. Friends stop sharing. The air is thick with suspicion. If someone claims to have a secret stash, they're either a liar or about to be robbed. You notice people growing nervous, glancing over their shoulders, keeping pouches close and conversations closer. A man you barely know tries to trade you his family's prized cheese for a few leaves. You decline, only because the cheese smells worse than the tobacco shortage feels. The situation worsens at the docks. As word spreads that another shipment is delayed, crowds gather, hoping for a miracle, or at least an argument. Fights erupt over rumors of hidden barrels, smuggled pouches, or a sailor who definitely has a friend with a cousin who has the good stuff. The town watch does their best to keep order, but mostly they just join the bidding, waving their batons and shouting offers like everyone else. In the privacy of your own home, you turn to alternatives. First, you stretch your stash, mixing it with dried herbs, old tea leaves, and the last of last year's nettle. Then, as hope fades, you try smoking whatever's handy. Rosemary, mint, dried parsley, even a scrap of hay from the stable. Each experiment ends in disappointment and, more than once, a coughing fit that convinces you to stick to tobacco, if you can find any. Ingenuity abounds. Housewives bake tobacco cakes, mixing crumbs of leaf with flour and spices, hoping for a passable smoke. The neighborhood apothecary markets a substitute blend made of moss, beetroot, and optimism. The local poet claims the shortage is inspiring, but you suspect he's just too broke to afford the real thing. You try every remedy, but nothing replaces the deep satisfaction of a proper pipe. As the weeks stretch on, new etiquette emerges. You learn to be subtle with your cravings. The lucky few who still have a supply become local celebrities or targets. Sharing is now a highly strategic move, reserved for bribes, negotiations, or wooing someone whose family might have a hidden pouch or two. Smugglers thrive, offering mysterious packages at twice the going rate, then disappearing before anyone can complain. Even the Queen feels the pinch. Rumor has it that court festivities are quieter, with fewer pipes circulating and more nobles sulking in corners. A black market develops within the palace itself, with pages and footmen running covert errands for desperate lords and ladies. For once, the social order is upended. Everyone, from the grandest to the lowliest, is united by longing and lack. Eventually, the wind shifts and the ships return. The first barrels off the boat are greeted with cheers, tears, and slightly unseemly celebrations. Prices drop, tempers ease. You fill your pipe, take a long, luxurious drag, and vow never to take another shipment for granted. Until next time, of course. Because in Tudor England, supply is never certain, and nothing makes you appreciate your bad habits like the threat of running out. You wake up after a night at the tavern with a head full of smoke and regret. Your throat feels like you gargled gravel. You vow never to smoke again. That lasts until breakfast. Morning in Tudor England is never gentle, but after a night of revelry, it's especially unforgiving. You open your eyes to the faint sound of someone hawking oysters in the street, sunlight stabbing through a crack in the shutters, and the undeniable sensation that your mouth is coated with a unique blend of yesterday's ale, pipe ash, and existential despair. Your head throbs. Your tongue feels like it spent the night under a cartwheel. You wonder if perhaps this is the final price for last night's just one more bowl. The memories drift back with all the grace of a drunken bear. You recall laughter, shouting, a chorus of off-key ballads, and the endless passing of pipes from one sticky hand to another. There was a contest, you think, involving smoke rings and questionable wagers. Someone tried to light a pipe with a flaming brandy-soaked sausage. The landlord begged everyone to use the sand bucket. Someone else, possibly you, forgot. The taste of charcoal lingers on your lips. The first cough of the day is a theatrical affair. You try to be discreet, but it rattles the walls and startles a passing cat. Your chest feels tight, as if it's lined with yesterday's soot. In the corner, your cloak carries the unmistakable aroma of burnt feathers, and your best hat has acquired a new, suspiciously circular hole. You contemplate abandoning them both and starting fresh, maybe in a new city. But duty, or at least habit, calls. The day begins. You shuffle to the basin and splash your face with cold water, hoping to shock yourself into functionality. The mirror offers little comfort. Your eyes are red, your teeth a shade darker, and your expression somewhere between wounded poet and haunted relic. You mumble a few promises to the saints, no more pipes, at least not today, or at least not before noon. Breakfast arrives, and with it, temptation. The Willoughbys next door are already outside, pipes in hand, looking impossibly well rested. The scent drifts over the garden wall. You scowl, swear you're quitting, and then, by some miracle of social pressure, find yourself borrowing just a pinch to settle your nerves. The cycle begins anew. Throughout the day, you try to hide your symptoms. Your friends exchange knowing glances as you fumble with your pipe and wince at every inhale. The town apothecary suggests a herbal remedy, rosemary, honey, and silent prayer. It does nothing. The vicar recommends confession. You consider it, but the risk of a coughing fit during the sermon is too great. Hangovers are a public affair in Tudor England. The streets are full of the walking wounded, heads pounding, voices hoarse, determined to act as if nothing is amiss. Everyone has their favorite cure. More tobacco, stronger ale, cold porridge, or simply complaining loudly until someone brings tea. A neighbor suggests boiled nettles. You try it once, never again. By midday, the regrets fade. The cough lingers, but your resolve wavers. The rituals of the day, work, gossip, market errands, all seem easier with a pipe in hand. Even the old woman at the bakery, who never misses a chance to lecture about the perils of the devil's leaf, is outside, taking a surreptitious drag behind the flour sacks. Misery, it turns out, does love company. Evening comes, and you gather once more with your friends. The events of last night are already the stuff of legend, a tale of bad decisions, improbable heroics, and one very annoyed cat. The pipes are lit. The cycle begins again. Regret is a constant companion, but so is laughter, camaraderie, and the stubborn belief that tomorrow will be different. So you cough, you swear, you promise yourself never again. But in Tudor England, as in all ages, the surest cure for regret is simply to try again, with slightly less enthusiasm, slightly more caution, and, inevitably, another puff. Every surface in London now has one thing in common: a sticky brown spittoon. The streets are lined with them. The Queen threatens to outlaw spitting, but no one listens. You step in one. Congratulations, you've completed the Tudor tobacco experience. If you ever wanted a symbol for the golden age of Tudor tobacco, look no further than the humble spittoon. London's least loved piece of public furniture. It begins innocently enough. A few pipes, a bit of leaf, a society still unaccustomed to swallowing. Soon, every inn, shop and hallway is graced by a well-used, usually overflowing communal pot for the disposal of, well, everything you'd rather not think about. You learn quickly to watch your step. The city tries its best to maintain order. Signposts are painted. Spit here, not there, absolutely not in the bread basket. It's a losing battle. The average Tudor Londoner, equipped with a pipe, an abundance of confidence, and an astonishing disregard for decorum, develops the reflexes of a marksman, able to hawk a stream across a crowded room, past 3 barmaids and the local magistrate, into a waiting spittoon. Sometimes, most of the time, the misses outnumber the hits, and the floors bear witness. The smell is memorable. Imagine a combination of sour ale, burnt herbs, last week's stew, and something faintly resembling despair. The spittoons themselves are rarely emptied. Why waste a perfectly good apprentice on such a vile chore? So they sit, growing stickier and more alarming by the day. You think you've grown used to the sight, until the moment you step in one, lose your balance, and introduce your best stockings to a fate worse than the plague. Etiquette adapts. A sharp side-eye becomes the city's unofficial greeting, reserved for anyone careless enough to spit without warning. You master the delicate art of the nod and move. A quick step sideways, and a polite cough to announce your intention. The more refined taverns install decorative screens to shield patrons from errant sprays. But everyone knows that if you value your clothes, you never sit by the spittoon. Of course, the city's authorities attempt reform. Fines are imposed for reckless expectoration. The Queen herself, in a rare fit of civic outrage, is said to have threatened a public ban on all spitting within sight of the palace. The result? A brisk trade in pocket spittoons, fancy snuff handkerchiefs, and the rise of the discreet spitter, the man who can, with a practiced flick, hit the mark from behind his hat. Some embrace the trend. There are contests, unofficial naturally, held after hours in the back rooms of the city's oldest inns. Who can hit the spittoon from the farthest distance? Who can land a bullseye after 3 pints? Side bets are made, reputations are built, and the local carpenter does a brisk business replacing cracked pots and cleaning up after the champions. For others, the spittoon is the last straw. Your aunt, once a keen advocate of medicinal smoking, now refuses to enter any building without a sturdy pair of boots and a handkerchief held tightly over her nose. The local apothecary campaigns for a cleaner, kinder city, but finds his pamphlets used as makeshift spittoon liners. You try to keep your own home respectable, but guests inevitably leave evidence, a sticky brown patch here, a mysterious stain there, that no amount of scrubbing can erase. Yet, somehow, it all becomes part of daily life. Londoners step, shuffle, dodge, and occasionally curse their way through the sticky labyrinth, bonding over shared misfortune and mutual disgust. You catch yourself aiming for the spittoon one evening, miss by an inch, and realize you're officially a local. It's a mess, it's a hazard, it's an oddly unifying civic nuisance. But like everything in Tudor England, you adapt, complain, and keep moving, because at the end of the day, nothing says home like a well-worn spittoon and the shared skill of not looking down. You find yourself at a dinner party where half the guests are pretending to taste subtle floral notes in their pipe smoke. One man claims he can identify the region by smell alone. Another insists his leaves were aged in the hold of a Spanish galleon for depth. Someone passes around a tasting spoon, which is really just a fancy way to share germs. You take a drag and declare, hints of barnyard with a finish of anxiety. Everyone nods. You've made it. Welcome to the rarefied world of the Tudor tobacco snob, where status is measured not by wealth, wit, or wisdom, but by your ability to differentiate genuine Virginia from generic garden mulch. It isn't enough to simply own tobacco. You must have the right tobacco and, most importantly, the vocabulary to discuss it at length. At first, the snobbery is subtle. A merchant casually mentions that his blend comes from a trusted sailor who would sooner eat his own boots than lie about a leaf. The host of the evening offers a delicate pinch of something described as exquisitely sun-cured, and there's a collective gasp when it's revealed the shipment came via Antwerp, not Bristol. The horror. Someone else offers Caribbean Black, which, based on the looks, is either the finest in London or just well-branded mold. Critique is everything. Your new friends lean in, inhale deeply, and exhale with the sort of theatrical satisfaction usually reserved for court musicians or the arrival of a fresh loaf. Ah, yes, notes of leather, oak, and melancholy. You can really taste the salt air. This one's a bit forward, but with a noble finish. You realize that half the language is invented on the spot, but nobody wants to be the first to admit it. You practice your own contribution, eventually settling on a hint of barnyard with a finish of anxiety, and it's greeted with nods and murmurs of approval. You are, at last, among your people. The equipment is equally important. Pipes are longer, stems more elegantly carved, and each is presented with a flourish. Cases are lined with velvet, engraved with initials, or, if you're especially pretentious, your family crest. One guest brings out a tasting spoon, which is apparently used for sampling loose leaf without soiling your hands. You make a mental note never to borrow it, as it's clear everyone else has had the same idea. Competition is fierce. The greatest compliment is for someone to ask where you procured your blend, ideally in a tone that suggests you must have bribed a Spanish pirate or rescued it from a sinking ship. The gravest insult is to suggest that your tobacco is a little green or, even worse, reminds me of what they sweep from the apothecary's floor. Debates erupt over curing methods, sun versus smoke, aged in rum barrels versus salted in casks, and you quickly realize the only winning move is to agree vigorously with whoever is loudest. Sometimes, things get out of hand. A heated argument breaks out over whether the best leaves come from Virginia or Barbados. Someone brings out a small map, and a scholarly type begins to lecture on soil quality and rainfall. A poet attempts to lighten the mood by composing a sonnet to his favorite blend, but loses the crowd halfway through the phrase, "Thou dusky muse of gentle slumber." You clap anyway, just in case. Of course, exclusivity is half the appeal. A new shipment of tobacco becomes an event. Invitations are sent, guests arrive in their best, and the host reveals his secret reserve to gasps and envious glances. There are whispered rumors that the Queen herself has a personal supplier, and that the best blends never see the light of the London market. You wonder if any of it is true, or if it's all just another smokescreen. By evening's end, you've learned two important things. First, nobody really knows what they're tasting, but everyone knows how to pretend. Second, the true connoisseur's greatest talent isn't their palate, but their poker face. You leave with a full belly, an empty pouch, and the satisfaction of knowing you've finally cracked the code. In Tudor England, sometimes the real flavor is just being able to say you were there. It's the height of summer, and London smells like a compost heap in a thunderstorm. The rich cover the stench with rose water, pomanders, and sachets of lavender, everyone else, apparently, with a constant cloud of tobacco smoke. You try combining all three. Now you smell like an anxious apothecary who's lost his sense of moderation. On the bright side, at least you can't smell anyone else. Scent is everything in Tudor England. Forget class, connections, or even coin. If you can walk down the street and not be mistaken for a fishmonger's apprentice in the middle of July, you're doing better than half the city. With every alley and market stall wafting a new note, horses, sewage, boiled cabbage, and yesterday's laundry, anyone with ambition arms themselves for battle. The battlefield? Your own nose. Enter the era of scent layering, Tudor style. The wealthy bathe, rarely but loudly, splashing themselves with expensive perfumes imported from Florence or Paris. Citrus, musk, rosemary, all mixed in hopeful combinations that say, I have never so much as looked at a stable. Women tie pomanders, tiny ornate orbs filled with spices and resin, onto girdles or tuck them in cleavage, swinging like miniature weapons against the persistent smell of reality. Men carry scented handkerchiefs, dabbing their wrists and necks as they pass through the more fragrant parts of town. For the rest of the population, the solution is less refined but twice as persistent. Tobacco smoke fills every gap. It doesn't hide the odors so much as aggressively overwhelm them. Walk through a London street in midsummer, and you'll witness clouds rising from every stoop and window, clay pipes, bundles of herbs on the fire, anything to keep the stink at bay. You soon realize that your neighbor's constant smoking isn't just about habit. It's about self-preservation. Of course, innovation abounds. The apothecary, ever eager for new business, begins advertising multi-scented tobacco blends, tobacco infused with orange peel, rose petals, or even cinnamon. Results vary. One attempt at a lemon mint pipe leaves you smelling like a failed dessert and sneezing until supper. The Royal Lavender Reserve fares little better. Still, the fashion takes hold, and soon every market boasts a dozen blends promising to refresh the body and spirit. You wonder if the body or the spirit is supposed to enjoy it more. The fashion-forward take things a step further. Women dab perfume behind the ears before lighting up, creating a cloud of sweet and smoky confusion. Some men rub cloves on their teeth before a night at the tavern, ensuring every word they utter is accompanied by an aromatic punch. There's even a trend of tying sachets of dried herbs directly to hats, which works surprisingly well until it rains. Then, the whole city smells like soup. You try to keep up, blending every method in the book, rose water in your hair, pomander in your pocket, pipe clenched between your teeth. The result is a personal aroma profile that can only be described as determined. Your friends are polite enough not to mention it, though your cat won't sit near you anymore. On the bright side, nobody in your household has fainted from the smell of your feet in weeks. Social etiquette adapts. Complimenting someone's scent is now a subtle way of declaring allegiance. You smell like the Queen's chambers is high praise. You smell like the Thames at low tide is grounds for a duel. People with means hoard perfume recipes, trade pomander ingredients, and gossip about whose blend masks the melancholy best. You soon learn to sniff approvingly at the right moments, nodding along as if you, too, have opinions about dried marigold. In the end, the goal isn't to smell pleasant, just less unpleasant than everyone else. The true marker of success is not being noticed at all, and while the scent of summer in London is always a compromise, you take comfort in knowing you're part of a long, proud tradition, masking reality, one puff, spritz, and pomander at a time. So tonight, as you lie back in your clean bed with filtered air and a strict no-smoking policy, take a slow breath and give thanks to your lungs for not being expected to inhale flaming leaves as a sign of patriotism, masculinity, or a substitute for toothpaste. Remember, you have survived the highs and lows of Tudor England's tobacco craze. You've paid the king's tax, endured suspicious looks from the parish priest, burned half your wardrobe, and watched your teeth slowly shift from ivory to old map of Wales, all in the name of a habit nobody really understood, but everyone agreed was terribly fashionable. And yet, somehow, the people of Tudor England carried on. They coughed, they gossiped, they invented whole new ways to avoid each other's breath. They navigated taxes, sermons, and accidental house fires, and still managed to find time to fall in love, lose fortunes, and write the occasional sonnet about smoky delight. So as you drift off tonight, let the absurdity of it all settle over you, like a cloud of very expensive imported smoke. Let the struggles of the past remind you that people will do just about anything for a little bit of comfort, a dash of novelty, or the chance to look mysterious in a drafty tavern, because history is never just misery and madness. It's also about stubbornness, hope, and the endless human ability to invent new ways to complicate our lives. So maybe, tomorrow morning, as you sip your coffee or scroll through your phone, send a quiet thank you to your ancestors. They paved the way, usually while wheezing. Sleep well, breathe easy, and may your dreams be free of taxes, stains, and the lingering smell of someone else's pipe. Good night.